LBS presents Mysteries of the Pyramids. Hosted by Omar Sharif.
The Nile in Egypt, the aptly named Queen of Rivers. Here, a magnificent civilization reached beyond their dreams and came close to touching the heavens. In the next 2 hours, we're going to take a wondrous and mysterious journey back to this ancient land. Tonight you will see firsthand the mysteries, magic, mummies, and newly discovered tunnels of ancient Egypt. And we will unveil in front of your eyes never before seen treasures hidden for generations in the walls of Highclere Castle.
And now, live from England's Highclere Castle, our host, Omar Sharif.
Good evening, and welcome to Highclere Castle in England. At first glance, this estate seems as far away from the Nile Valley as it is possible to be. But that is not the case. The soul of ancient Egypt inhabits this place. And within these walls, there lie clues that may help us to explain one of the world's most profound mysteries, the mystery of the pyramids. Good evening, Lord Carnarvon. Thank you so much for receiving us on this beautiful estate.
It's lovely having you with us.
Thank you. Lord Carnarvon is the owner of this beautiful castle. He's also the grandson of the man who discovered the incredible treasures of King Tut. Later on this evening, he will be with us when we uncover new Egyptian treasures never before seen.
I'll see you later in the library.
Thank you. Also with us tonight are 2 men who have dedicated their lives to this quest. Harry James, the keeper of Egyptian antiquities at the British Museum in London, and Mark Lehner, a gifted Egyptologist from Yale University. So over the next 2 hours, we're going to dig down deep into the past of Egypt and bring out into the light secrets that have never been seen before and may never be seen again. Next, we will test the miraculous powers of the pyramid and see how those powers have transformed the lives of ordinary and extraordinary people.
When Mysteries of the Pyramids Live continues.
Sponsored in part by Trident Sugarless Gum. Good to chew and fights
More Mysteries of the Pyramids Live.
Pyramids have always had a mystical hold on the mind of man. Why is this so? What is it about this shape that captures our imagination? If you look at the back of any dollar bill, there you will find a pyramid. If you go into any number of shops around the world, there you will find unusual objects, such as these. It seems obvious that the pyramid is more than just a symmetrical collection of stones. Even Napoleon Bonaparte, a man not noted for his humility, was awed by the Great Pyramid. In fact, some say he gazed into his own future when he stood under its walls. In July 1798, Napoleon Bonaparte lands in Alexandria with his French army of 40,000 men. After an exhausting crossing of the desert, the French army reaches the foot of the pyramids. The Mameluke Murad Bey bars their way. On the morning of the 21st of July, 1798, Napoleon assembles his troop and leads them into battle with these words. Soldats de ces hauteurs, 40 siècles d'histoire vous contemplent. Soldiers, from these heights, 40 centuries of history look upon you. Soon after this speech, Napoleon asked to be left alone in the king's chambers. Some time passed. He then emerged with an ashen face. Something happened to Napoleon within these granite walls. Something that forever changed his life. Was it a premonition of his eventual fall and exile that would begin a few years later at Waterloo? Was it the ghost of Cheops, who came to remind him of the price of glory? Only Napoleon knew. And he died with a secret, perhaps while sitting at this very desk, which actually belonged to him, and is now one of the many treasures to be found at Highclere. Pyramids can be found around the world, from the deserts of Egypt to the rainforests of Central America. Why were these pyramids the first things built in their respective civilizations? The dimensions of the Great Pyramid incorporate the ratio pi, a symbol used in the calculation that can give the circumference of a circle. Coincidence or intention? And finally, is it conceivable that the Great Pyramid is an astronomical observatory? Through computer analysis, Stonehenge was shown to be a highly developed measuring device for calculating the seasons. Analysis has suggested the Great Pyramid has the same function, for they share almost exactly the same circumference. There is evidence for all of these concepts, but no one theory has emerged. In fact, there are almost as many theories about pyramids as there are pyramids themselves. Some claim that they are everything from hydraulic pumps to a storehouse of ancient knowledge to a large-scale model of the human brain. Who built them? Well, take your pick. Priests from Atlantis, the sons of Adam, or of course my personal favorite, architects from outer space. Many of these theories come from people who are true believers in the pyramid's mystic energies. Energy they refer to as pyramid power. It is said that pyramid power can do everything, from sharpening razor blades to preserving food to increasing sexual potency. Maybe the ancients knew something that we'd like to know. Though it seems fantastic, people claim they have actually been healed by sleeping underneath a pyramid. And they maintain that their dreams are enhanced, made more vivid when there are pyramids close by. Energies that are said to flow from the apex of the triangle. You can easily purchase an entire library of pyramid power books. How-to manuals on the way to use pyramids in everyday life. Your garden not doing well? Build a pyramid greenhouse. Want to feel younger? It may not be high fashion, but perhaps it can keep those gray hairs at bay. Do the pyramids have a strange hold upon the mind of man? Well, you are with us tonight. I confess that when I was inside the Great Pyramid, I did feel very strange, like as if I was isolated from the world, living another life, in a way. But the real story of the pyramids needs no embellishment to make it fascinating. And there are other mysteries. For example, besides the largest of these pyramids, there lies the Sphinx. And nearby, we discovered a mysterious tunnel which actually runs underground next to the Sphinx itself. There we made a dangerous journey that brought us one important step closer to solving the mystery of the pyramids.
When we return, we'll enter an ancient water tunnel and bring you a never-before-seen look at the underground tomb of the Sphinx. When Mysteries of the Pyramids Live continues. Live from Highclere Castle.
I'm standing here with Mark Lerner, one of the new generation of Egyptologists. Mark is from Yale University and has spent the last 10 years exploring the Giza Plateau. I think it is safe to say that he has gone deeper into its mysteries than anyone. Mark, where do these mysteries come from? I mean, are we ever going to solve the mystery of the pyramids?
Well, for modern archaeologists, the real mystery is the people. We know that these pyramids were built by the ancient Egyptians 5,000 years ago, who served Cheops, but how did they do it? How did they organize their society? These are the questions that we ask. But of course, there are those other mysteries about hidden chambers and passageways, and about those mysteries, there are some tantalizing clues at the Great Sphinx.
We're not close to solving them, are we?
We may be close, closer than many people think.
Mark recently went through a mysterious passage, cut into the rock itself, and we were fortunate enough to have our cameras along with him. And they filmed something never before seen. A cavern 100 feet below the pyramids, located in the shadow of the Sphinx.
This ladder really inspires confidence. It goes to 100 feet under the pyramid plateau, down to the groundwater.
What we are seeing here are the remains of ancient pillars, eroded by the water trapped inside this chamber.
Well, the water table has gone down so far that now we can actually see some of the ancient debris on the surface, and over there we have part of a human leg bone. We have a whole skeleton, as a matter of fact. But now look, you have the remains here, maybe seen for the first time ever, a disarticulated skeleton, different parts of a human burial. You can make out the leg bone over here, a plate, part of the skull. And we have not only a human burial here, but it looks like maybe some kind of a sacred animal burial, perhaps an ibis. The wood may be ancient as well, maybe part of the sarcophagus. But it's really phenomenal that the water has gone down this much. Usually the water is crystal clear, but even though it's dirtier, under the water you can make out the outline of a shaft that goes down yet deeper under the pyramid's plateau. And nobody's been to the end of it. This is a fragment again of a human bone that's lying here in the rubble underneath the water filling this chamber. Here's a bit of pottery. Here's more bones. Spinal vertebrae, I mean. My God, it's all over the place here in this muck. And what fascinates me is that this clay may actually be the remains of a human life.
What is at the end of these tunnels that lie just underneath this water, barely visible beneath the opaque surface? Where do they lead? No one knows. Incredible. To hold the bones of the ancients in your very hands. Imagine the stories they could tell. But we do know something about how these people began their great civilization. And the background to their dramatic achievements still exists, almost exactly like it was 10,000 years ago. Let us return to the beginning and see where it all started. Egypt was conceived in the shadow of these cliffs, and they cradled the infant civilization as it began to mature. From these barren rocks, her people went into even bleaker desert, the borders of which have protected Egypt from invasion for countless centuries. On these dry plains, they first began to contemplate their destiny. Their dreams needed nourishment, and the Nile River fueled their ambition and brought food and life to these shores. This land has been fertile for countless generations, and one can easily imagine the ancients tilling these fields. The day-to-day life of these ancient Egyptians has been passed down to us through their arts. And you can almost lose yourself in these ancient scenes of daily life, human images that transcend time. Egypt soon expanded her territory, and the great pharaohs deployed their armies far and wide. Zoser, Khafren, Cheops, great men who possessed absolute power. Men who would be gods, and these living gods built for eternity. It is hard to believe that one man invented the pyramid. His name was Imhotep, the great seer and vizier of the pharaoh Zoser. First, he began with a single layer of stones covering the tomb of his pharaoh. But Imhotep worried that robbers might break through and violate the tomb. So he added one more row of blocks, and then another. This continued until he realized that he was building steps towards heaven. The first pyramid was the result. Later, Imhotep was virtually deified by the Egyptians. His creation may have been one reason. It still stands today in Saqqara, 20 kilometers south of Giza. When Zoser was put to final rest, his head may have pointed north, towards the North Star. He lay in his tomb like some kind of ancient space traveler, poised to take a journey beyond eternity. After Imhotep's pyramid, this unique design began to appear throughout Egypt. Pyramid construction achieved a sophistication and artistry that we can only dream of. And the culmination of that skill was the Great Pyramid of Giza, constructed from stones that weighed from 2 to an astonishing 70 tons, stones that rose to the height of a 40-story building. To give an idea of the size of this Great Pyramid, the capital of the United States would easily stand in its shadow. And if these stones were stretched out, they would span the length of the United States from coast to coast and almost back again. How did the Egyptians do it? How was this Great Pyramid built? For if we assume that the pharaoh Cheops built this Great Pyramid, then we can safely assume it was built in the 23 years that he ruled. 23 years? Imagine. Thousands upon thousands of men working without rest day after day as Cheops' monument rose to the heavens. But though this pyramid was built as the home for a god, no god can be found within its walls today. For all trace of Cheops has vanished. His mortal remains scattered to the wind. Sad proof that though man may wish for eternity, it will ultimately elude him. Even a living god like the great pharaoh Cheops.
When we come back, we'll enter the tomb of King Tutankhamun and discover the treasures and deadly curse that lie within its walls, when Mysteries of the Pyramids Live continues. Pyramids Live.
Though immortality was their intention, history has favored two pharaohs above all others. One, because he built an incomparable monument to enshrine his memory. The other, because his treasure was discovered in our century. Now it is time for us to meet that pharaoh face to face and tell his story. His name? By the early 1920s, Egypt seemed to have been picked clean of all treasures. But two men refused to give up hope. Their lifelong love affair with Egypt was about to be consummated in a discovery that would shake the world. Howard Carter was of humble ancestry, the son of an English artist. Edward Stanhope Molyneux Herbert, 5th Earl of Carnarvon, was a noble to the core, and had funded expedition after expedition for Carter, with little to show for it. But Carter persuaded Carnarvon to fund one last excursion to the sun-baked valley. For Carter sensed he was close, very close, and he was right. This is a wonderful painting of your grandfather, I suppose, isn't it, Lord Carnarvon?
That's right.
I noticed that it's signed by Carter.
Yes.
Would that be Howard Carter?
No, it was his brother, and I believe it's a wonderful likeness of my grandfather. It's in crayon.
How did they get together, Howard Carter and your grandfather?
Well, my grandfather had a nasty accident driving a motor car in Germany, and he had to go out to Egypt. And he wanted to do archaeology, and he understood that Howard Carter was free, and he was one of the greatest archaeologists of his time, and so he employed Howard Carter.
Thank God he did,
Yes.
because we wouldn't have now the treasures of Tutankhamun to admire.
Exactly.
Let us revisit the scene of Lord Carnarvon's greatest triumph, the Valley of the Kings in Egypt. There we will witness the wonders that he saw when he arrived in Egypt on January the 23rd, 1923. And for the first time ever on television, we will hear Howard Carter's own description of that most auspicious day. When Howard Carter set forth from Cairo to Luxor, he traveled south down the Nile River, a journey that took several days. He arrived at this spot, little changed since 1922. Carter's home overlooking the Valley of the Kings still stands. As we approach the area where Tut's tomb was discovered, we can well imagine what was running through Carter's mind. Was this expedition going to come up empty-handed like all the others? Just as in 1922, the sound of digging can be heard.
We are looking for new tombs, or tombs which has been made a long time ago and which are lost. Alors, if we found it, because you know in Egyptology we try to find a lot of things, we have many indications, and we found something else, as usual. But if we found it, it may be in a better condition than the others.
Carter's search went on and on. Time and money were running out. Then, an entrance to a tomb was discovered. Nearby his house, the telegraph lines still crisscrossed the sky. Lines that transmitted the message Lord Carnarvon had waited a lifetime to hear. That message read,
At last have made wonderful discovery in Valley. A magnificent tomb with seals intact. Recovered same for your arrival. Congratulations, Howard Carter.
That message was received right under this roof in Highclere Castle. Quickly, Lord Carnarvon made preparations to leave his ancestral home. And Carter, too, was prepared to open the tomb. These are his words.
33 centuries had passed since human feet last trod the floor on which we stood. And yet the signs of recent life were around us. But when we came to a golden shrine with doors closed and sealed, we realized that we were in the presence of the dead king. We were to witness a spectacle such as no other man in our times had been privileged to see. I carefully cut the cord, removed the precious seal, drew back the bolt, and opened the door.
Carter and Carnarvon began to look around the tomb, dazzled by the riches they beheld. The outer chambers were soon emptied. As Carter first approached the inner chamber, his anticipation must have been incredible. He and Lord Carnarvon prepared to enter the domain of an immortal being. In attendance, an entourage of gold seemed to frown upon the interlopers. The glory that was Egypt had come to life. Carter and Carnarvon could only look with amazement. In their wildest dreams, they never could have conceived of such a treasure. When they reached their final sepulchre, they could hardly contain their excitement. Gold. A sarcophagus of pure gold blinded them. At last, the long and sometimes frustrating hunt had ended. Everywhere they looked, they saw gold. Treasure beyond definition of the word priceless. And then, in the unsteady light, they espied their incumbent form, aglow with a golden light. Cautiously, they approached the great pharaoh. For a brief moment in the life of an English lord and an American archaeologist, time lost its meaning. They looked into the face of a god. Who once lived upon the earth, empowered by all the traditions of a great civilization. Who can say that his power could not outlast the grave? Who can be certain that this power would not awaken once disturbed? Who can say that there is no curse?
Arthur Weigall, British writer and archaeologist. His death in London has revived the mystery of the curse of the pharaohs. It was in the shadow of the famous pyramids 10 years ago that Weigall, as a member of Lord Carnarvon's expedition, braved the Egyptian curse to help uncover the tomb of King Tutankhamun, buried for 5,000 years. None among the tourists who flocked to view the underground treasure house dreamed that of the 15 who opened it to the world, 12 would meet unnatural deaths within the short span of 10 years, most of them under mysteriously sinister circumstances. Lord Carnarvon, on the left, here with Howard Carter, American aide, died of a rare insect bite within 2 months after King Tut's discovery. His wife followed him in death from the same strange cause. Several committed suicide, one was murdered. Curse or coincidence? Scoff if you will, but one thing we know. In the dead king's crypt was this inscription: "Death shall come with swift wings to him who toucheth the tomb of a pharaoh."
The world press soon turned the curse into front-page news, and it has not been far from the headlines since. While filming in the tomb, we experienced technical problems that no expert could explain. Cameras breaking, lights refusing to go on. Minor problems, to be sure, but problems that stopped the moment we stepped outside into the light. Are there more treasures in Egypt? Perhaps. There may be other tombs intact, other storehouses of riches waiting for discovery. When we come back, we will go on an expedition into the sun-baked Giza Plateau and dig up some clues that point to the pyramid's mysterious builders.
Discover artifacts lost for generations as we unveil for the first time ever on live television the lost Egyptian treasure of Highclere Castle, when Mysteries of the Pyramids Live continues. More Mysteries of the Pyramids Live.
When the Egyptians were climbing towards the heavens, the grounds this castle stands upon were inhabited by nomadic tribes. But today, these grounds have something in common with the great complex of Giza. For just as this castle is the center of the estate of Highclere, so too was the Great Pyramid of Giza, the center of an extensive complex. It was inhabited by thousands of men and women, a community pulsing with life, yet centered around a symbol of death. Recently, Mark Lerner and I traveled to the Giza Plateau, and he was really able to bring the area alive for me. Mark, I felt somehow that we have something in common, that you were an Egyptian in some previous life. I feel that you lived before in Egypt. What do you think?
I would be honored to have been in Egypt with you before, Omar, but I won't comment on that. I did spend a good part of this lifetime in Egypt. I lived in Egypt 13 years and spent 10 of those years doing archaeological research on the Giza Plateau. We studied the Great Sphinx for about 4 or 5 years with the American Research Center in Egypt, and for the last 4 years we've been mapping the entire Giza Plateau, sponsored by Yale University.
I'd like you to come along on the same journey that Mark and I took. Or in your case, you won't have to leave your chair.
Well, this knoll south of the Sphinx has always been a favorite place for me. It's, as the Indians would say, it's kind of a power spot. You can sit up here and you can see the whole panorama of the Giza Plateau. So this is probably where Cheops' architect stood, with an eye to planning what would become one of the 7 wonders of the world, the pyramid for his king.
The knoll may have been a kind of command point for the Cheops building project. It overlooked the place where stones for the pyramid were quarried in the areas to the south. Tracks were used to haul the stones from the horseshoe-shaped quarry at the lower left to the plateau above. When the pyramid was complete, a long ramp or causeway spanned the distance to the valley floor. Tombs for his officials and queens completed the city of the dead. Cheops' son Khephren added his own pyramid and temples to the landscape. A causeway spanned the distance to the valley floor. He had the Great Sphinx sculptured out of the natural rock close to the base of the plateau. Mykerinos, probably a grandson of Cheops, completed the pattern of the Giza horizon. His temples were finished by his son.
Just in back of the knoll, we look down upon the probable location of the workmen's settlements, where thousands, if not tens of thousands of workmen had to have been settled for the building of the pyramid.
Mark, there's one thing that mystifies me. I think it mystifies the whole world. Could you explain to me how these workers carried these stones, or, I don't know, brought them up 450 feet up to the top of the pyramids?
Well, frankly, that mystifies we experts as well. But they had to have used some kind of a ramp. The problem with a ramp that runs straight on to the side of the pyramid is that it would be about 7 football fields in length if it had a functional slope. And every time they wanted to increase the height of the ramp, they would have to increase its length, and all the work would have to stop.
Well, that would be impossible.
Impossible. So my idea is that the ramp started close to the base of the pyramid, and it wrapped itself up and around the pyramid at 1 1/4 turns to get the stones to the very top. And once they had reached the apex, they then dismantled the ramp as they went down, stage by stage, smoothing the sides of the pyramid as they went.
That's a good theory, Mark. Are there any other theories about how they brought these stones up?
One expert actually suggested that they used a pulley, that they had supports on the top and a counterweight, And as the counterweight went down one side of the pyramid, the stones would go up the other side.
But surely they didn't have pulleys or modern instruments.
That's the problem. We have not really found pulleys. But
I mean, these are the tools, aren't they? These are the sort of tools they used.
Yeah, these are the kinds of tools that we actually find in the debris around the bases of the pyramids. We find wooden mallets like this, and as for metal, they only had copper. And apparently, with such apparently crude tools, they smashed the stones into shape.
I can't believe it. What's that? Well, that's a strange-looking object, isn't it?
Well, this is a particularly crude form of what's called a pounder. Usually they were large and made out of dolerite, and apparently one worker would hold these pounders in both hands and just smash away at the stone to rough it into shape. But you can imagine how many fingers must have been lost in the process.
And how did they orient the stones?
Well, they had ways of doing that too. They put down stakes with string, and we've actually found the holes, as we'll see. The amazing thing is that with these crude tools, they joined 3-ton blocks of stone together with a seam so fine that you can barely get a razor blade in between it.
But how did they know just where to place these huge blocks? I mean, they didn't have surveying equipment.
Well, they had their own kind of surveying equipment. Right here you can see the holes left by the ancient surveyors where they put their stakes down to mark the line, and they measured the base of the pyramid from this line to get it accurately.
My God, they're still there after all this time.
Yeah, and there are other traces left on the floor around the pyramids too, like these cubes, this grid, which was left by the ancient quarrymen as they worked the surface of the plateau down to make the base of the Khafren pyramid. They channeled, and then they cut off the humps that were left from the channeling, and that way they worked the stone down.
That looks like quite a climb.
It is. We're going to the top of the Khafren pyramid, the second one at Giza. Well, I'm sitting on the casing, which was once snow white, so you can imagine how the sun looked on it when it was brand new. It must have been blinding out there. It's a sheer drop. Can you imagine thousands of workmen up here, day after day?
Incredible, absolutely incredible.
Down there you see the Valley Temple where the pharaoh was embalmed, and the long ramp or causeway which had walls and a roof, so it was like a long dark tunnel coming up the plateau to the funeral temple where they probably recited chants similar to the Book of the Dead over the king's mummy. Now modern Cairo is expanding all around the pyramids and threatening the Sphinx with its pollution.
The Sphinx has survived many attacks on its massive body. Centuries of storms and sands, even cannonballs and hammers. But nothing quite as deadly as this present attack of erosion and pollution. The latest one occurred on the 7th of February this year.
This piece has been falling from up to down here, and I think that we have to find a way for an international campaign to save the Sphinx, because the Sphinx does not belong only to Egypt, but belongs to all over the world.
It seems that the city of Cairo is rapidly closing in on the Giza Plateau. And if we are not careful, we may lose these monuments. Mark, can anything be done?
Well, our good friend Zahi Hawass, the director of the Giza Plateau, and the Egyptian authorities are looking at a plan to make the Giza Plateau a kind of national park which would restrict access to the area. And there are a great deal of measures that they're discussing. Hopefully these will preserve the plateau for future generations.
Yes, I think it's time we did something about that plateau. In just a few moments, we will return and explore a symbol of everything that is enigmatic and mysterious in our world, the Sphinx. Stay with us. The best
Coming up next, we will climb down a secret passage and enter the mysterious world that lies deep inside the Sphinx, as Mysteries of the Pyramids Live continues. Mysteries of the Pyramids Live.
Archaeologists who work in Egypt Often look for treasured artifacts, an area where no one has looked before. Occasionally they get lucky, but often they are frustrated in their search. It is ironic that treasures may exist inside one of the most visible and famous landmarks in Egypt, the Sphinx. Its enigmatic smile may conceal a storehouse of information that might help us to finally solve the riddle of the pyramids. We must journey there now. There is an age-old legend that the Sphinx guards hidden knowledge of a subterranean tomb, a temple, or a hall of records of a lost civilization. In its various forms, the mythical tale can be traced back to early Arabs, Christians, back to the Romans or the Greeks, and even back to pharaonic times. The Sphinx is the symbol of eternal mystery. Like the Great Pyramid, there are things we know about the Sphinx, and yet it still remains surrounded by tantalizing mysteries. You see, in the time of Tutankhamun, the Sphinx was already 1,200 years old. And it was Tutankhamun's great-grandfather, the pharaoh Thutmose IV, who was first to restore the crumbling man-beast. He told us so in the first archaeological record ever written about the Sphinx. This granite stela, weighing more than 5 tons. Thutmose was a royal prince, but not in line for the throne. While on a hunting party, he fell asleep between the paws of the great cat, which in those days was buried up to its neck in sand. The Sphinx appeared to the prince in a dream. "My son, deliver me of the sand, and I will make you king of Egypt." And then the text breaks off. But Thutmose did become king. Now, what did he find in his excavations of the Sphinx 3,400 years ago? Well, look to the stela. The Sphinx sits on a platform with a door at the bottom. Could this be a hint to the entrance of the legendary Hall of Records? The Sphinx was finally excavated down to the bedrock floor in 1926. No pedestal was found. Experts scoffed at the notion of a secret passage in the Sphinx. But something was missed. A passage was found under the rump of the statue. It had been resealed under the stone skin of the Sphinx and forgotten by all, except one of the boys who worked at that excavation. 60 years later, that boy was an overseer of workmen for antiquities, Muhammad Abdel Mawud. In 1980, he pointed out the exact location of the passage to Zahi Hawass and Mark Lerner. It was found exactly as the old man had remembered. Today, we know of 2 passages, one going down into the Sphinx and one going up. At the moment, Mark Lerner is going down along the passage where cameras have never been admitted until now. This upper passage is blocked because of the restoration stones placed by Tutankhamun's great-grandfather. Is the passage from an even earlier time?
These footholds were the ones carved by the ancient workmen as they formed this passage into the body of the Sphinx. Where they were going with this thing question. What were they looking for? Were they making this as a tomb to bury somebody under such a sacred spot? We're not really sure. But as I say, it is a long-standing tradition, maybe going back to ancient Egypt itself, that the Sphinx hides some kind of a secret passage.
The passage in the rear of the Sphinx proved to be a dead end. But there are hints of others. Sonars recently used by different American, French, and Japanese teams indicate something, some mysterious cavity. Here, just under that enigmatic stone box built against the shoulder of the Sphinx. Why is this box here? The equinox sunset strikes over this box and into the sanctuary of the Sun Temple. There may have once been a colossal statue of Osiris, which stood upon the box. Osiris was the lord of the underworld. Did the builders of the Sphinx leave us a clue? Did they carve a symbolic underworld, a secret cavern, near or even under the Sphinx? Dr. Hawass, good evening.
Good evening.
Now, you're an expert, our greatest expert on the Sphinx. What do you think is in this cavity?
Maybe something really that we don't know.
What are they going to do, excavate?
No, the most important thing that we're going to do now is restoring the Sphinx. We'll take stones, putting stones, and maybe when we're going to do that, maybe we'll find the mysteries of this box.
You see, the enigma, the real mystery of the Sphinx, even our greatest experts can't give an answer. Are there secret chambers in the Sphinx as yet undetected by our technology? Some psychics believe that the complete story of Atlantis is hidden under its bulk. Some believe that it sits upon a temple of initiation. And many believe that there are treasures under these sands. If the pyramids were designed to awe, then the Sphinx seems intended to mystify. It sits with stone paws outstretched, gazing into eternity. Half man, half lion, total enigma.
When we come back, our cameras will go where no camera has gone before, into a fantastic chamber locked inside the massive stones of the Great Pyramid, as Mysteries of the Pyramids Live continues. Live from Highclere Castle.
The secret passages within the Great Pyramid were first discovered in 820 AD by a caliph. His name was Abdullah al-Ma'mun. He and a team of workers broke into the pyramid by heating the huge blocks until they were red hot, then dousing them with vinegar. Though the smell must have been pungent, it worked. After a tortuous journey, they finally reached the pyramid center. And there, they found a huge granite coffin. An empty coffin. The Great Pyramid has been besieged by visitors ever since. Recently, Dr. Zahir Hawass climbed to the summit for the first time in his distinguished career. And his feelings upon his ascension are shared by many who made that difficult climb.
Feel it's really something. You know what really I feel? The 10 meters that I was climbing, looking down, I can see Giza since 5,000 years ago. Life. The very special thing really that I can say now, that I can connect this with 5,000 years ago, with the time of Cheops. That the pyramid is a horizon, is a symbol for the sun god, the god Re. The god Re, the sun god, always in the top of this pyramid. I feel that I'm in the top of the horizon of Cheops. I believe in destiny, and I believe that there is a reason for me to be here. What's this reason? I don't know. But I always have a great feeling
and a great connection between the site.
Mark, how did you feel the first time you ever saw the pyramids?
Well, I was riding in a bus, a crowded bus, through Cairo, and we came to the Pyramids Road, the 4-lane road that goes to the Giza Plateau, and we were going through, you know, high-rise apartment buildings, and there were wires on the horizon. I was watching for the pyramids because I knew we were getting close to Giza, and suddenly there they were, like giant silhouettes, and they looked really like something from another world, and like they were defying explanation.
Mark recently went on expedition to some of the rarely seen inner chambers, and we took our cameras along. Let's go with him now.
It goes all the way to the bottom of the Cheops pyramid, down into the bowels of the bedrock.
It is a long, hot and slow walk to get into the interior of this 40-story pyramid. And as this map indicates, the pyramid is honeycombed with passageways. It was obviously not the intention of the pyramid's builders to make it easy for casual visitors to get inside.
This is the so-called well, or the robber's hole. It goes up to the Grand Gallery. It's blasted through the core of the pyramid. It may be where the people escaped who closed the King's Chamber up in the pyramid. You see these footholds, they may have climbed down through them. Yeah, I went up there once, and it's pretty hairy. One slip, and you slide all the way back down, and you end up here at the bottom. What a great view of the robber's hole. We made it. This is the bottom chamber, the very core of the pyramid, the absolute bottom. The workmen never finished cutting this chamber out of the solid rock. These mounds of rock are what are left when the king came down one day and said, "Put down your tools. I want to be buried higher up in the pyramid." And since he was the living God, they had to do what he said. And so, as the story goes, they built another chamber for the king, higher up in the pyramid, the one that's mistakenly called the Queen's Chamber. It was made out of limestone with a pented roof and this marvelous niche for the king's statue. They almost had it completed. They only had to smooth down the floors and the walls. And then they think the king came along one day and said, "Yeah, I don't like it. Let's have it higher up in the pyramid." And so once again they had to put down their tools, and they built the king's chamber, the highest. It had a marvelous grand gallery leading up to it. It was encased with red granite, brought all the way from Aswan, 500 miles downstream. Finally, the king was satisfied, and that is where they think Cheops was laid to rest, inside his pyramid.
Above the king's vault, we see chambers above chambers above chambers. It's thought that they relieve the tremendous weight upon the king's burial.
I'm in this crawl space that was carved from the top of the Grand Gallery to the first of the 5 chambers above the King's Chamber, apparently done by the workmen after the top of the King's Chamber and the top of the pyramid had been closed off. It's thought they had to get to that first chamber above the King's Chamber and the floor on top of it because earthquakes or something had caused the ceiling blocks to crack, and they may have wanted to get in here to inspect and possibly to repair with plaster.
Through this cramped entrance, we emerge into one of the chambers and discover walls inscribed with ancient and modern graffiti.
This is one of the names of the work gangs
it reads, "How powerful is the great white crown of Cheops gang?" They put their names on the blocks because they were responsible for moving it. And there was competition between them to get them into place.
We are almost at the top now. A good place to stop and rest, for we are right on the edge of making a most fascinating discovery.
This is one of the original leveling lines of the chamber. And you can see that the leveling line has been put on after the blocks are put into place. Before they were put into place, the workmen put this cartouche of the king, which is underneath the line. And that's part of the name of one of the work gangs. These channels in the top of the granite blocks indicate how they were working the block down from the top. You channel, leave a hump, take away the hump, and gradually work the surface away. Well, as massive as these structures are, people are worried that they might collapse. Last year, engineers were in here, and they put up these seals to see if the chamber is slipping at all. If the seal is cracked, of course it means there's slippage in the ceiling blocks. All these ceilings, all these rooms show cracks running through the 80-ton granite blocks. There's been slippage at some time. Is it still happening?
Yes, sir. Okay, I got the bottom. Now the right foot is going to have to come down a lot. Hang on. Put the light up so you... Okay. See what I mean?
Up here at the far end of the uppermost of the 5 chambers, you have what really clinches the Great Pyramid for Cheops. It's his name written in red ink on one of the stones, left by the workman who dragged it into place, and it clearly spells out Kha-U-F-U, Khufu, the ancient Egyptian name of Cheops. This has never been seen on film before.
So, proof that Cheops did build the pyramid. So much for ancient astronauts. But the mystery of how he built it still eludes us. Perhaps the papyrus blueprints crumbled into dust in the lap of the Sphinx. Or maybe they're still there, we don't know. And the Sphinx stands in ancient majesty, almost daring us to discover the reason behind its seductive half-smile.
Twilight journey to the city of the dead, where we come face to face with an ancient mummy preserved through the ages. Who was he? We'll find out when Mysteries of the Pyramids Live continues. Live from Highclere Castle.
Life in ancient Egypt was but a prelude to afterlife. And because that afterlife was eternal, nothing was left to chance. Before a body could journey to the land of Osiris, the keeper of the underworld, it had first to be prepared. When an Egyptian died, his body was readied for this journey, a process that took 70 days. First, the body was soaked in a salt solution that absorbed all moisture. And then the vital organs were removed and placed in canopic jars. The brain was liquefied and removed through the nostrils. But the heart was kept intact. For they believed that it was the center of knowledge. And when the priest was finished, they had transformed a human being into something they thought was eternal, something called a mummy. One night, I came face to face with the debris of death. My guide and I went into a bone house, a storage shed for the ages. Inside that bone house, I looked into the empty eyes of an ancient Egyptian. When I asked my guide how old this skull was, he answered 5,000 years. Imagine, 5,000 years. We went into another room, and in the corner, almost hidden in a bed of straw, were the remains of a mummy, lost in the shadows, after most of the ancient bones had been moved elsewhere. It's incredible. It's incredible to be holding a bone that's 5,000 years old. this was part of a human being. It looks so... It could be somebody's bone of yesterday. I can't believe it. My hand is shaking. I mean, it's so exciting. How fragile we are, really, because, I mean, these are bones, we have bones like these, exactly like this. And this looks extremely fragile, but there it is, 5,000 years old. It's not reduced into dust or anything like that. I would have thought they would be reduced to dust. There it is, probably exactly like the one I have in my own body. We have no need to fear. Their ghosts do not haunt these bones. These are the people found in the labyrinths around the Great Pyramid. There was no earlier civilization. The skulls have no antenna. These were not extraterrestrials descending on Earth from a strange planet in space. These are the skulls of Egyptians who lived 5,000 years ago. Courtiers, mistresses, architects, officials, making up the royal court of Cheops. This is the chapel of the lovely Merisunk, Cheops' granddaughter. She became queen in her own right when she married her half-brother Khepri. Yes. And we even know the preferred woman's figure 5,000 years ago. Tall, slender. Could this be the beautiful Merisande? Perhaps it was one of Cheops' scribes. Maybe one of those called Master of Secrets. Below the Giza Plateau, a maze can be found. A maze in the form of tunnels that twist and turn and seemingly never end. And Mark Lehner is one of the few people who know where those paths turn. For one is never sure what is just around the corner. A wall, a passage, or an empty sarcophagus.
There's a lot of charcoal in there, a lot of charred bone. It looks like there's clearly been a fire in the sarcophagus. Sometimes the mortal remains of the deceased were burned so that they couldn't attack the plunderers as they robbed the tomb.
When you are alone in this eternal night, you feel the weight of the centuries pressing down upon your shoulders. It takes a brave or perhaps foolhardy person to penetrate deeper. Through this narrow passageway, we entered a secret chamber where the life of Egypt is on display. On the walls of Merisunk's tomb, murals were painted depicting everyday life, so that these activities could nourish the souls in their afterlife. Is a city of the dead, a necropolis inhabited by ghosts. One can almost sense them, feel them, as they whisper and taunt us with the secrets they possess. Mummies have come to symbolize the mysterious, the ageless, the fantastic. They were the means by which Egyptians hoped to transcend their material body, or khat, a word that means something that decays. when they placed themselves within this bedrock, it was as if they planted a seed that would germinate and then flower, as the mummy's soul came forth from the underworld.
Virtual labyrinth down here. This goes to yet another tomb chamber, and in that chamber there's another shaft going down several meters. There's another chamber at the bottom of that, and it seems to go on forever.
In this case lies one of the most perfectly preserved mummies in all Egypt. We even know his name, Nefer. This mummy was literally pickled and then reconstructed in the image of the living human being, almost a statue molded out with bandages. As we look into Nefer's eyes, staring into the darkness, it seems, for this Egyptian at least, that decay has won the battle against immortality.
They honeycombed the whole plateau, putting themselves away for eternity.
Perhaps in a portion of the heavens reserved for the ancient Egyptians, the former inhabitants of these empty husks are in the embrace of Osiris, living their promised afterlife. If they are, they may well be displeased at the way their earthly remains have been treated, for their disturbance is almost like a wound in time. This might explain what happened one night in 1938, almost 150 years ago to the day. A stone sarcophagus was taken from the pyramid of Mykerinos, that's the smallest one, and loaded upon a ship called the Beatrice. That ship set sail for Great Britain and promptly vanished off the coast of Portugal. Perhaps somewhere in the heavens, an ancient face displayed an icy smile.
When we return, the mystery of the missing treasure of Lord Carnarvon is solved as Highclere's butler uncovers artifacts hidden for generations, when Mysteries of the Pyramids Live continues. From Highclere Castle.
Death shall come on swift wings to him that touches the tomb of a pharaoh. Those prophetic words were rumored to have been inscribed on the tomb of Tutankhamun. Unfortunately, no evidence has been found to back up that rumor. But death did visit many of the people associated with the King Tut expedition, including the former owner of this house, Lord Carnarvon. Lord Carnarvon, how did, in fact, your grandfather die?
He was shaving, he had a spot on his face, he cut it, it became infected, he got septicemia and died.
Died from shaving?
Died from shaving, and we got his razor here.
I may have a look at it?
Of course. Robert, could you bring the razor over, please?
This is the actual one.
This is his actual razor. Here it is, nasty-looking thing.
Yes, it is.
There's the wyvern, the Herbert crest on it, and there's the razor.
It is said that at the same time that he died, at the moment that he died, strange things happened.
All the lights went out in Cairo, and at the same time as the lights going out in Cairo, his Jack Russell Terrier in the housekeeper's room in this house dropped down dead.
How extraordinary. And therefore, do you believe in the curse of Tutankhamun?
I do and I don't. Howard Carter lived till he was, till 1939, and my Aunt Eve, who was the third person into the tomb, died only a few years ago.
Recently, the Carnarvon family returned to the headlines, but this time it had nothing to do with the curse. Lord Carnarvon, I understand that some of your grandfather's discoveries were recently rediscovered.
It was very exciting. We were last summer, in the room next door, and we just completed an inventory of the furniture and the pictures and the carpets and everything. And I said to Robert Taylor, "Is that the lot, Robert?" And he said, "Yes, except for the Egyptian stuff." And I said, "The Egyptian stuff? Well, what do you mean? I didn't know we had any Egyptian stuff." He said, "Yes, I'll show you where it is."
Where was it?
I'll show you now.
Okay. Go ahead.
We went across here, and Robert said to me, "I'll move this table. I've never walked through those doors in my life, because there's always been furniture in front of it and furniture the other side."
And, Mr. Taylor, how did you know there was something in there?
Well, on the rare occasions that the house was open for charity, we had to have both doors open to allow the sort of passage of the people through, and I saw this door which happened to come slightly open, and so being rather curious.
Me too, I'm dying to see what's in there.
And I opened this box, and
just looks like a cigarette box.
Yes, it's a cigarette box with Cairo written on it, and here inside is a lovely flail necklace about 3,000 years old.
How did you feel when you opened this cigarette box or whatever and found these treasures?
Well, I was hysterical with excitement, as you can imagine, and very excited.
Did you recognize that they were very valuable things?
I thought they were Egyptian, and I immediately rang up the British Museum, spoke to Mr. Harry James, the keeper of Egyptology, and I said, "I believe I found something very exciting," and I told him about it, and he was thrilled.
Can we see some more of these objects?
We've got them next door. I'll show you.
Thank you. When we return, we'll take a closer look at these hidden treasures, unseen for generations, as Mysteries of the Pyramids Live continues.
From Highclere Castle, more Mysteries of the Pyramids Live. Of the Pyramids continues.
This beautiful object is just one of the many artifacts newly uncovered from these castle walls. From what I've been told, many of these objects are from the tomb of Amenophis III, a chamber that was said to dwarf in treasure the tomb of King Tutankhamun. Amenophis was Tutankhamun's grandfather. When he assumed power sometime around 1350 BC, Egypt was a center of civilization, and the riches of the world poured into his royal coffers. When he died, he was buried with great pomp and circumstance. His reign marked the high water mark of the Egyptian Empire, and his tomb must have reflected that glory. Who was this Amenophis? What did he look like? During his reign, he built many statues commemorating and enshrining his power. Like all of the pharaohs, he thought he was building for eternity. But today, these huge statues are faceless. And until the treasures of Highclere, they were all we had to remember this great pharaoh by. Now, first of all, were any of these objects found in King Tut's tomb?
No, nothing from Tutankhamun's tomb at all.
So can you tell me a little about them?
I think the right person for you to ask is standing over there, Mr. Harry James. Would you come over, Mr. James, please?
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. James.
Good evening.
Tell me a little about this. I mean, this has got a beautiful color. Where does it come from?
Well, it comes from a tomb, and it's a figure that's partly a lady.
A lady?
A lady, as you can see, it has breasts.
I like that.
Don't laugh, because consider this. As we're talking of ladies, you could grind your eye paint powder on here, or other pigments if you wish to do. Oh, exactly.
Yes.
And that is very useful. And if we're talking about cosmetics, come and look at what we have over here. Now, if you were a lady,
yes,
then you might like to wear that.
Yes,
indeed. See, this is cornelian and shell. Very beautiful still.
Beautiful. They would be very fashionable today, wouldn't they?
Very fashionable, yes.
Look at the colors on these things. I mean, I can't believe they were not painted today.
So you might think, but I can assure you they're about 3,000 years old.
What is this extraordinary object here?
This is a helmet from a statue of Amenophis III made of many different materials and a particular helmet worn by him as a warrior.
How wonderful. I noticed something like a big bird, very beautiful indeed, with beautiful wings. What is it?
Not a bird.
Not a bird.
If I had wings, I could fly too, but this, in fact, is the goddess Isis.
Wife of Osiris.
Wife of Osiris, and she, in fact, was the goddess that protected, to some extent, a dead person, and this was placed on the chest of a mummy and protected the mummy. Most extraordinary thing.
This is incredible, isn't it?
It's in a sense second-hand, you know.
What do you mean?
Well, second-hand because it was found in a cache of these jars in front of the tomb of King Merneptah, the son of Ramesses II the Great. But in fact, it is inscribed with the name of Ramesses.
So he inherited it, as it were, perhaps.
He inherited, and it was used to contain the junk left over when he was mummified, the bits and pieces.
Alabaster, is it?
Alabaster, yes, indeed.
What is... That intrigues me. This little chap here, who's got a finger in his mouth. What's he doing? Biting his nails?
Not really. No. You mustn't judge everyone by yourself.
Yes, I know. You noticed?
Yes. No, this is the god Horus as a child. Harpocrates. And as he is a child, he is shown with this characteristic finger to mouth, and he has a great heavy lock of hair here.
Where do they come from?
These come from a place called Tel Balamun in the Delta. Not a very well-known site, but it was briefly investigated by Carter and Carnarvon before the First World War.
Well, all these things are extremely beautiful, but they're so small. Shall we have a closer look at them?
A head of Amenophis III, made of wood, from the tomb. And here is another, of the same kind. Two heads of ladies, and they differ in age by 1,500 years.
Beautiful.
A knob from a box of Amenophis III with his name in blue faience. An armlet with snake decoration made of silver from Tel Balamun. Cosmetic objects from a Middle Kingdom tomb 3,000 years old. And an archer's leather archer's guard to protect his arm with figures of captives embossed on it. Model tools and weapons from a foundation deposit made of bronze and of wood. Remarkable little objects, and still almost functional. And here, some more of these lovely blue faience objects. Two of them you see rather closer here, one an Ushabti figure on the left. Here, the head, the forepart of a little squatting hippopotamus, the forepart of a lion figure in the same material. The head of the goddess Hathor, sometimes called the goddess of love. And here, the Apis bull, the embodiment of royal power, and a double-headed falcon sphinx with the name of the king Shabaka.
A controversy exists today, saying that these artifacts and many other treasures scattered around the world's museums should be brought back to Egypt. Well, we asked Madame Noblecourt, the French archaeologist we met at the Valley of the Queens, her opinion on this subject. Should these objects be returned?
Why? Why? You know, I'm very fond of Egyptian people, and I work for them. It is me who had launched the safeguard of the monuments of Nubia, Abu Simbel, Philae. It is me who has prepared everything. And I'm Egyptologist since 50 years. But I wonder why object which has been bought, which left Egypt officially for a private collection a long time ago. We are in 1908 and 88, and the collection was made between 1902 and 1920. It was officially out of Egypt. Why do you want the object came back? There is no reason.
As you can imagine, there is another point of view, and we asked Dr. Zahi Hawass for the Egyptian side of this controversy.
To Egypt itself. Lord Carnarvon, Howard Carter, We know through what has been written in many books right now that some of the monuments left Egypt illegal by those people. To have these monuments in Lord Carnarvon's private home, it will show that it is illegal. They do not have any legal evidence that they bought these monuments or it went through a division between the Egyptian government and the Carter expedition. Then I think we have the right to return these objects back to Egypt because it's part of our heritage and it went through some of it from King Tut's tombs and some of it from other sites.
Whatever the controversy, Highclere Castle will be open to the public in July, and these new treasures will be on display for all to enjoy. I'd like to thank you for allowing us to see all these wonderful objects, and Mr. James, thank you for explaining where they come from and what they are.
Pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you. Though we know that in life and in death, the pharaohs were magnificent, it is a pity we only have such few personal mementos to remember their passing. What will we leave behind for our distant ancestors to remember us by? Look around your home. Think. What would survive among your possessions? What would they say about you?
When we come back, Omar Sharif enters the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid, a chamber that has driven men mad and worse, as Mysteries of the Pyramids Live continues. Mysteries of the Pyramids Live.
The ancient Egyptians believed that the Great Pyramid of Giza anchored the center of the world. They felt that all of the continents and all of the works of men radiated out of this central spot. And in the mythical heart of this powerful spot, in the center of the Great Pyramid itself, is the King's Chamber, the inner sanctum of Cheops, the heart of the world. This is the chamber where Napoleon confronted his dark future. And this is the chamber I entered on one cloudless night, and I feel that I too have glimpsed into eternity. Absolute power during his life as a man. He achieved immortality as a god after his death. Now this grand gallery is aimed right at the heart of the pyramid. It leads to the focus of the whole of Giza necropolis, the inner sanctum of the king's tomb. It appears that the king changed his mind several times during the construction. Being the supreme power and the living God, he moved higher and higher. But it all started in the bottom of this stone mausoleum. This is it. The inner sanctum of the royal grave. It's incredible. I'm here for the first time with you. Now, while his soul was glorified far beyond the horizons of mere mortals, Cheops's body was left behind in this granite sarcophagus. Now, it is cold and empty. But when it held the royal remains, the sarcophagus was called by the Egyptians the Lord of Life. It was for them like a nuclear power core that energized the pyramid, the temple, and indeed the whole of Egypt. Dr. Hawass, please tell me, who was this man who was worshipped like a god? What do we know about him? What did he look like?
This is the only small statuette that ever found for this great king. And even is not found at Giza. It's found in a site in Upper Egypt called Epirus.
Again, we are left with mystery. The clues point to Cheops as the builder of the pyramid, but the feeling for his presence is fainter than any ghost could ever be. What we do know is that this inner sanctum and its empty sarcophagus speak to us of resurrection, the renewal and uplifting of the human soul. If there is reincarnation, who do you think you were?
I believe I was Cheops.
Of all the people throughout recorded history, many are called, but few are chosen. By their example, they inspire and determine the fate of our planet. All are gathered in their own kind of Olympus, a round table of greatness. Among these noble men, there is one that stands out, the Pharaoh Cheops. And yet, we don't even know when he lived. It's all lost in the night of time. There is but one thing that we do know about him, and we will always know it for a long time to come. He is responsible for the seventh wonder of the world, the Pyramid of Giza. This ancient nation's greatest legacy to all of us is not the search for treasure, nor the gold of the child pharaoh Tutankhamun, nor the extraordinary architectural achievement of the legendary Cheops, but the fact that the spirit never dies. This is not just a monument to one great king. The people who built these pyramids gave their lives in order to prolong the life of the soul of a man. We will return in a moment and take one last look at these wondrous artifacts and gaze into the eyes of the mystery that was Egypt.
Mysteries of the Pyramids, live.
If he could speak, what would he say to us? Would he tell us of kings and gods, of scribes and architects, of a river that spanned the world, of the light of knowledge that burned hotter than the sun? Or would his tale be a humble one, of the calluses on his hands, the bruises on his body, the cloak of weariness that would descend upon his shoulders each evening as he returned home beneath the shadow of the unfinished pyramid? What would he say to us? To all of you watching, thank you for accompanying me on my journey. It has been more than a journey across space. We have gone beyond time itself. The pyramids are only the most visible mystery of ancient Egypt. For we not only don't know all the answers about these magnificent people, but we probably don't even know what questions we should ask. So perhaps all of you might reflect upon this affirmation of mankind's ability to at least fight eternity to a draw. For the pyramids are the closest thing to eternal that we are ever likely to create.
Too much sun causes skin cancer. Use common sense and plenty of sunscreen. A health tip brought to you by University Hospital.